Welcome back. Now, marriage is an institution that has existed for centuries. In the past, it was used to join kingdoms and act as a form of security. In other societies, it was a rite of passage, and still in others, a way to procreate. Whatever the reason, marriage has been a cherished and revered part of life. But what happens when it breaks and the two who were once one go their separate ways? Divorce is the legal term, but nothing can really describe the pain and anguish that comes as a result of it. Tonight, we discuss the aftermath of divorce. But before we do, here's a look at the reality of divorce in our society and just why it appears to be on the rise. Very few people actually get into marriage thinking about getting out of it before these words.
Till death do us part.
And though few intend for the marriage to end, very many find themselves either filing for divorce or staring at a stack of papers with their name as the respondent. After 4 years of marriage, Wamaida Karanja knows all too well the pain that comes with a divorce.
I waited for a sign. I waited for a sign during the separation. And once it came early, the March of 2013, and I knew for sure this is what I needed to do as my next step going forward. And I sought out lawyers. So I started from church and just asked friends and family, and anyone who I knew who had been divorced. And everyone was like, no, I don't even want to talk about it. Or why do you want to go there? So initially I'd have to lie for a friend, etc. But then I gathered both male and female lawyers, and I have to also be very cautious about the cost at the time because they were ranging anything from 75,000 on that day, and that's a while ago, through to 250.
An expensive affair that often sees many couples resort to separation as an option. According to Kenyan law, there are 5 grounds upon which one can file for a divorce, including adultery, cruelty, extreme depravity, desertion for at least 3 years, and irretrievable breakdown.
Having to read the reasons for divorce and having to find one of them there, I thought that was ugly. I'm like, why can't the court just understand we can't work together anymore?
Wamaida is one of countless Kenyans who have gone through the process of allocating assets and the even more painful exercise of determining the custody of the couple's children.
It's like being at a burial or at a funeral service and you just never get to bury the person. It's like being in this constant wake that you're attending and you never get to do the actual cremation or the interment of a relationship, of hopes and of dreams and of desires, even of having more children. So that emotionally breaks you. I think it left me very callous.
Let's take a look briefly at divorce cases over the last 18 years. The following numbers are of cases filed at the Milimani Law Courts. In 2001, a total of 101 divorce cases were filed. That number rose to 115 in 2002 and then to 206 cases in 2003. Now for 2004, 2005, 2007, and 2008, these years recorded 296, 295, 357, and 369 cases respectively. Between 2010 and 2015, a total of 1,246 cases had been filed. Let's fast forward to 2016. Now, these numbers include the cases filed at the High Court, Magistrates Court, and Cadiz Court. For the financial year between 2016 and 2017, 1,652 cases were filed. For 2017 to 2018, the cases filed were 3,260, and to the current 2018 to 2019, 4,364 cases were filed. So what could be contributing to more couples calling it quits?
We have a lot of couples marrying much later. People would get married in their early 20s. Today you'll find people get married in their late 30s. In your late 30s, you're set in your ways. You've got a career going, you know what you want, your values are set, you know where you're coming from. And so you are in a much more difficult space to conform to someone who just comes along and says, hey, from this day forward, you are my wife and these are the rules and regulations.
As much as it is discouraged, divorce has not spared the church. Bishop Ken Kimeu has come across his fair share of couples seeking help in salvaging their marriages.
As the church, again, it would be absurd if we buried our heads in the sand and not address the whole issue of the high rate of divorce that is even happening within the church. Because you see, church people are part of the society. And what is happening in our present and what we would call postmodern society is the pressure for life that has come onto family, unlike it was some time back. To make ends meet for many families is not easy. So in terms of the postmodernism also, you find both husband and wife are working and they have pressure from their places of work and other things that they need to put together. And so you find by the time they get into a family home scenario, they are already stressed people.
It's the picture of perfection that many are sold but are hardly prepared for after the wedding day.
Unfortunately, we are in a society where we are raising girls to become brides, not to even become wives. Our focus is on the day and on that night, and then that's it.
A friend of mine who does cakes, many cakes for couples getting married, gives the final cake on the first anniversary. And actually they became a friend of mine by looking me out and saying, hey, Jenny, we need to talk. People are not coming for their anniversary cake. When I call them for it, they are not interested, or they say we are not together anymore, or we are going through a challenge.
Today, stories abound of couples breaking up on a whim, even before the ink on their marriage certificates has dried, seeing many enter the divorcee club, where they experience the social consequence of rejection from family, religious institutions, and society.
When you are told things like you can't serve in certain parts of the church, you can't do certain things. I've had instances where you can't be somebody's best maid because you're a divorcee, so chances are all you'll be telling them is negative. I'm like, you'd better hope I'm in that chick's camp, because I can tell her things of sin and red flags of sin. But the church has this superficial, very holier than thou attitude.
Bishop Kimeu, however, says the church should be the last place one should be sidelined.
For us, really, is to extend a warm hand of fellowship to such people and not to ostracize them and not to categorize them and label them. Because again, you know, all of us are sinners and we are candidates for the salvation that God has offered so freely. And so I see this as a group of people who need care, who need to be counseled, and who need to go through healing.
5 years on, Wamaida walks with her head held high, despite the hits she's taken in life.
Be kind to yourself and somebody else. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know what struggle has gotten them to that place where they say they're walking away from a marriage. So for me, I'm always looking for opportunities to speak to women and just let them know, if the church is bashing you or if your own family is bashing you, you're not that paper. You're not the sum total of your divorce decree. You're not. God loves you just the way you are.
She hopes that by sharing her story, more grace can be extended to other divorcees seeking to find their place in society. All right, joining me in studio is a senior family lawyer, Judy Thongori. Thank you so much for coming, Judy.
Thank you for having me.
In your 30 years of practice,
yes,
would you ever think you'd be dealing with this magnitude of divorce cases from 101 18 years ago to over 4,000 now?
Absolutely not. I did not even think that I'd be dealing with the divorce cases at all. But it's what it is. It's growing, and yes, the number is large.
And what do you think could be contributing to this upward trend that we're seeing?
I think there are many factors. First of all, like the good bishop said, the pressures of life, but also that people desire and are going for a happier life. So when it's not working, they are less shy to express that it has irretrievably broken down than was the case before. But also, it has become easier to approach the courts. You know, we have the grounds like irretrievability, as long as you've been living apart, you know, for 2 years. So you don't even have to wash your dirty linen in public. You just need to go to court and prove that you've been apart for 2 years, and that is it. So that's becoming, it's making it possible and easier for people to access the courts than it was before.
So as it stands, there's 5 grounds on which someone can file for divorce.
Yes.
From what you've seen, what are the most common reasons that people would file?
I see infidelity is one such that many people find it difficult to live with. There's also cruelty. There's also more and more we feel the financial neglect, and we feel the financial imbalance, you know, coming up and causing many other issues. I would say that I see less and less of physical violence, but I see more and more of verbal and emotional, you know, violence. So there's all those. But the interesting thing is that people now know that the place to wash the linen, the place to go to, is at the counselors for, you know, for the counselors for, how do I say, addressing the emotional issues. And so when they come to court, despite the fact that the breakdown was caused by all those factors, they come to court on the basis of, we've been separated for 2 years, or I've been deserted for 3 years, and I do not wish to wash my dirty linen in public. So if you actually look at the petitions that are being filed in court, they have less and less about the detail that has caused a breakdown.
And speaking of which, because we even saw in the story Wamaida talking about just the reasons alone are so acrimonious.
Yes.
You know, and is there a way to maybe change the language and make it a bit more amicable, where someone can say, we're not working out?
I see. Yes, but there's a threshold.
Okay.
The Marriage Act that came into effect in in 2014 is the one that now provides for irretrievable breakdown of marriage, and one of the threshold is a 2-year separation. And so that's what's happening. A lot of people are waiting for 2 years unless there's an emergency, so that they can then come and they just need to tell the court that and prove that, and that's it. They get a divorce, so that it's less acrimonious at that point.
And let's talk about the cost, because that's also quite prohibitive.
Indeed.
When it comes to filing the case and litigating as well.
Yes.
What is a couple looking at?
Wow, that's difficult, and ranges from one lawyer to another. And it could range from 50,000 Kenya shillings all the way to 500,000 Kenya shillings. And by the way, it also depends on how long the case is in court, because you see, we also charge for the time expended, for the involvement, and some cases are very involving, others are not so involving. So agreement is what many people do. They agree with their clients on what they should charge. And again, it also depends on capacity, because how many people in Kenya can even afford 50,000 Kenya shillings? So can I say that there are also very many people representing themselves, and it's not difficult actually. It's filing a petition, and you can get a petition like an old petition elsewhere and be able to use it for your own, take it to court, and nobody knows better than you as to why you're divorcing. So where the costs are prohibitive for many people, I also need to say that it's very easy for people to represent themselves. The courts are very friendly as well. Yeah.
So on average, how long would a case take, and what would draw it out?
I see we talk about defended and undefended cases.
Okay.
Defended is where once a petition is filed and served upon the other person, they also come in, and one of the things they could be saying is this marriage is not ripe for divorce, so I mean for dissolution. Another thing they could be saying is that it is ripe for divorce, but for different reasons, you see. So that sort of becomes engaging. The undefended one is where you serve the petition on the other person, and they don't even bother defending it. That one you can even get a judgment within 6 months. In fact, it's a sort of a fast track when the matter is undefended, because you take like 5 minutes or so in court and you're done. So the courts will easily hear, 2, 3, or 4 petitions in a day. The undefended one could take up to 12 months. The time within which the cases are in court is becoming less and less. So you can almost be sure that everything remaining the same, your case should be concluded within 12 months, which is a long way from where we have come from.
And let's talk about allocation of assets.
Yes.
because it was once a 50-50 kind of deal, now we're looking at the scenario of what your contribution is to the marriage.
Indeed.
How is that now determined?
Actually, it's always been about contribution. Okay. So there was a period before 2007 when the courts had said that financial and non-financial contribution mattered. And so you proved financial and non-financial. And then the period 2007 to 2013, the court said that you needed to show financial contribution, a very difficult time for, especially for women in this country, because financial contribution, sometimes very difficult to show, but also that in many families, there's one person who goes out and there's another person who stays home. Since 2013, the law has now changed, the Matrimonial Property Act that we now have, it recognizes both financial and non-financial contribution. So there always will be contribution, whether it's childcare, whether it's companionship. You need to show that you are carrying some weight in the family. Yes.
And the more painful part of this is the custody of the children.
Oh, yeah.
It's very difficult because when two go their separate ways, and of course it's often the fight of who the children will go with. How then is that also determined in a court of law?
Well, that's tough. But here's the thing: when I first left law school, I saw divorce as sort of an event, that as long as a client was able to show me that they had the grounds for divorce and had filed a petition, and the court would make a determination and give a decree of divorce or judgment of divorce. But over time, I learned that that does not take my clients further than they wanted when they came to me. And I understood it's because marriage exists at several levels. And in fact, legal dissolution or legal marriage is a distant third. So for me now, and going forward, I look at whether people have been able to dissolve their marriage at the emotional level, because there is the emotional relationship, very important. Actually, I think that's where it starts. Then you go to the physical relationship, and then you go to the financial relationship, and then you go to the parenting relationship, and then you go to the property one, and then you have the legal. Now, the way we used to do it is that you would go to the legal first. In fact, that's what a lot of people expect, that you go to the legal first. But the legal does not sort out anything, because the person is still married emotionally, is still married physically, is still married in very many ways. So what we do now is ask people to go for counseling first. And when they do that, they're able to sort out very many things. A lady once told me that she felt that her marriage had irretrievably broken down. She didn't even want to see the guy, and she was fine with that. Her problem was that his family is a family she had had as her family for 40 years. It is them that she had celebrated birthdays with. It is them that she had cried with. It is them that she had Christmases with. So she was asking me, Judy, how do I rescue this relationship, and I let the legal one happen? You see? So until you appreciate that until all those ones are dealt with, then there is no divorce. Then it becomes very difficult, and the legal divorce then becomes very painful, because it does not address all those other painful ones. So what we do now, apart from the counseling, which helps people, walk through those various relationships, is also encourage them to mediate over matters of custody of children, because you see, in the end, if parties have decided to go their own way, it is still possible to co-parent. It is still possible for the children to feel that their parents are available to them, provided they do it in a manner in which you're not going to court and spending 5 years. It is still possible to divide property. Okay, it is still possible to do all those things. So we encourage mediation, and I can tell you that a lot of mediation is happening. A lot of those other issues that make divorce so difficult are being done, so that by the time we come to court, we can actually wait 2 years, because in those 2 years, we're not just sitting around doing nothing. We are dealing with children's issues, we are dealing with financial issues, we are dealing with property issues, and by the time we come to court to divorce, we can go on the basis of parties have been separated for 2 years, and there is no bile anymore, because they've been able to deal with it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So have you seen a difference in terms of the aftermath of the divorce, people are able to kind of move on a bit better, find some form of closure as a result of the mediation?
Absolutely. It's helping a lot. It's about being in control of the end. It is so important. It's about a person being able, you know, it's also an ego thing. There's also an ego thing there. Yeah. And it is very good when you're able to tell people, we have walked this journey, we are here, and I'm okay with it. It is very good when you're able to talk to the person with whom you have children. It is very good when you're able to make a decision over the matrimonial home. Because just imagine this, Victoria, you acquire property in marriage intending that you're going to use it for, both of you are going to use it, or the family is going to use it until the end. Right. And then divorce comes along. Here's a matrimonial home. You both love to live in that home. Right. How do you deal with that? How can a court of law ever do justice in that respect? Yeah. Unless the two of you are able to sit down and say, either we put it in the market and sell it, or one person is left there, the other one goes out. And there's such power in the person who decides, I'll leave you here with the children and I'll go out and get another place. It is very different if a court of law ordered them to leave that house to the other person. It becomes very difficult and the conflict never ends. So there is nothing better than when people are able to discuss, organize themselves, they walk out in dignity, and that family is dignified.
And another bit that is quite contentious is the spousal support.
Indeed.
Or alimony.
Indeed.
You know, what brings that on, and how do you kind of take the couple through that?
Oh, it's a difficult thing. I mean, look at this. So you're in a family setting. One person is earning more than the other, and the one who is earning more, whether it's a she or he, is happy to support the family. And then divorce comes knocking, conflict comes knocking, and that person closes all the taps. And when you take them to court, they will come and say, I cannot maintain the other person. It's very, very difficult because our courts are not able, for example, to make an inquiry into the bank. How much do you earn? How much do you have into the account? They depend on the other spouse to bring the evidence. So I can say that it's very difficult to get maintenance in the courts in Kenya. You only get it, by the way, only when you need it, not when you want it, only when you satisfy the court that you need it. And when you do, the figures are rather conservative. The period of maintenance now is become increasingly conservative. The attitude in the courts we have in Kenya is that no one person should be a beast of burden for the other. So even if you're not able to maintain yourself, you cannot consistently say that unless you're unwell. So you'll be given, like, say, 5 years, and then after that sort yourself out, and the figure that you get is not a figure that can sort you out or put you in the same comfort that you've been having in the marriage.
And what if the one who's being supported gets married again? Does that stop?
It stops completely. It stops upon remarriage.
Okay.
Yeah, you marry somebody else, the maintenance doesn't go with you.
And what happens in the case where the other party refuses to sign papers, refuses to appear, does not accept the divorce petition?
That's an interesting one, because I keep hearing people saying that. They say, I will not sign the divorce for him. You don't need to. The process is that whoever wants to file for divorce, they file a petition. It is filed in court, of course. As a notice is issued by the court.
Right.
That notice and the petition is supposed to be served upon the other party, who we call the respondent in this case. And it doesn't matter even if that person does not receive it. The person who serves the papers is called a court process server, who is able to return an affidavit in court and say, I served it, and they refuse to even acknowledge signature. Then the court has given you days. Within 8 days, if you haven't done anything, this matter will proceed undefended, or within 14 days, as the case may be. So whether you receive or not, whether you do anything about that paper, provided you have been served, the court process continues. And that's how we end up having undefended divorces. And one person may be saying that they do not want to be divorced, they still hope in marriage. The other person may be saying that they want a divorce. The court will hear both people. It may grant the divorce or it may refuse the divorce, depending on the circumstances.
So what happens if both parties are on board, they want the divorce, but their reasons do not meet the threshold?
Okay, interesting. If both parties want divorce, it's very unlikely that the court will refuse to give them the divorce. One party could want the divorce and the other party doesn't want, and the court could refuse. In very limited cases, the court could refuse divorce. But you see, the court cannot compel you to live together. So nothing happens.
Right.
You know, I mean, you continue living in your status until you get other grounds and come back later. Yeah.
And let's talk about a very, very common relationship status, come we stay. And many people have lived together for years, created a life together. And some are wondering, well, when it's over, can I go to a court of law and file for a divorce?
Indeed, though in our Marriage Act of 2014, we have a definition of come we stay or marriages by cohabitation, but we do not have any provision with regard to that. It was somehow left out. It was a very controversial thing. If you remember during the debate, some people were saying you must have lived together for 9 years before you can be considered married, etc. In the end, it was left out. The truth of the matter is, a court will still presume a marriage where a man and a woman have lived together, taken themselves to be husband and wife, and held themselves out to be husband and wife. Now, how long does it have to be? There is no periods. There's no periods prescribed. So that even if it's 1 year, it's the quality of that cohabitation that entitles you to call it a marriage or not, rather than the length of that cohabitation. Of course, it helps if it's a long period.
And what would ask, what is the difference between separation and divorce?
Okay, well, separation means you're just separated. So I keep telling people there is a physical separation where you just separate and no legal proceedings have taken place, but you're still married. Then there's a judicial separation where you can go to court and get a judicial separation, which in many cases we advise people not to do unless the other person is threatening you. But it just means that you're separated, you can come back together anytime, you're not divorced. And that when you want to divorce, you will still have to go to court and file a petition for divorce.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, as we wrap up, just in your years of litigating many of these cases, what do you find the impact has been of divorce generally on society and just our psyche when we think about the institution of marriage?
I think the institution of marriage is as popular as it ever was. And I think the fact that there are many divorces does not mean that there are not many people getting married. Even though there may be less weddings in churches and what have you, there's still so many people that I see, you know, coming together and forming families. But I know that over time, people begin to recognize and, like I said, to be conscious of the need to be happy in that union. And they know that if there is no happiness, then it is better to divorce and move on and get into another union. And I think the time has come for us to mention the word divorce without equating it with death, because it is not. It's only equated with death when we are not able to handle all the other things that go with the marital breakdown.
All right. Thank you so much, Judy, for coming in and making sense of all of this. A very painful part when it comes to, you know, separating from someone who you thought you would spend the rest of your life with.
Indeed.
But it is a reality for very many Kenyans.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
All right. That does it for Citizen Weekend. Thanks for watching. Keep the conversation going on social media. #Citizen Weekend. Have a lovely night. I'll see you again tomorrow on Sunday Live. Good night.